In the Juanita Helms Administrative Center, the Mona Lisa Drexler Assembly Chambers. It's January 3rd, 2019, calling the Finance Committee to order. And Madam Clerk, can we please call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Cooper.
Here.
Ms. Sanford. Here. Ms. Like.
Here.
Ms. Major. Ms. Williams.
Here.
Mr. Tacky.
Here.
Mr. Lejeski.
Here.
Mr. Gray.
Here.
Mr. Quist. You have a quorum.
Okay. So I guess as the brief safety minute, the exits are located behind you, and there's two behind each pillar over to the sides there. That takes us on to memoranda, reports, and presentations, of which there are none. Then contracts and bid awards, of which there are none. And so that takes us to item 4, advance ordinances and resolutions. Ordinance number 2018-46, an ordinance amending Fairbanks North Star Borough Code 7.12.20 regarding budget submissions. The sponsors are Assembly Members Lejeski and Major. There's information on page 2 of your packet. And can I ask for a staff report?
Sure. So first off, I'll start by stating that Mr. Williams, when he's back, is intending to give a more robust staff report, but because I believe he's still traveling, I'll give you guys kind of a brief staff report. So what this ordinance would do is put guidelines for any mayor, as long as it's in force, of kind of a budgeting criteria of a certain amount of money that must be set aside line item in our annual budgeting process into the FMR. And in the whereases, it kind of goes about telling you what the logic is behind this. And so the idea is that if you have a certain amount of property, you should set aside a certain amount annually to not incur deferred maintenance. And we've heard from Mr. Williams and from the previous administration that that's generally considered to be 2 to 4% of that property value. So for the purpose of this ordinance, we've used the insured property value stack for the borough, which comes out to $733 million. And yeah, $733 million, and at 2%, that comes out to, and I don't have all the math done here, I think it's roughly $14 million. So the idea behind this is saying, hey, we don't know that we can make 2% next year, but we think we could do 1% and glide up to 2% over 10 years. So that's kind of what it says. And then the question you might have is, well, it's not actually saying directly 2%, 4% times $733 million. There's kind of an approximation method in here, and that is just using a percentage of a portion of the borough revenue. So I suppose that's the staff report. I hope I did not confuse anyone.
Assembly questions and discussion? Mr. Tacky.
I'm just curious why we used 5 significant digits in the percentage amount, and why you used exactly 1/10 of that amount to increase each year.
The 1/10 of that gets you to an even 10 years. So to give you a little more color on that, ultimately it is subjective. We certainly, when it comes to debate next week, we could choose 8 or 12 or 20 or 50 or whatever the Assembly thinks is reasonable. But the 10 was essentially pulled out of thin air of what I thought was a reasonable number, and I think Mr. Williams was on the same page when we discussed that.
I mean, any particular favorite reason for 6.75?
Oh, for the decimals? If I recall, when I was first doing the math, it was kind of an even place to break them, and technically, from a mathematical perspective, I would have preferred to use fractions. However, I don't know that that would be a good format to present it in. So the more decimals, it does add a little bit more specificity, or whatever the correct word is. And it does actually make a difference if you calculate what the proposed budget amount that the mayor would have to put in. It will make a difference down to at least several $1,000s. If you drop down to 1 or 2 decimals, we could do the math, but it's going to start to be what I might say is a material number.
Yeah, thanks.
Mr. Cooper, ahead next.
Sure, I have a question for Ms. Dolan, and I guess, does this create any dedicated fund issues? My assumption is no, because it's the mayor's proposal and the Assembly can then change it, but.
You're correct. So it's just the mayor's proposed budget. It's not actually a fund or anything that's created.
Thanks.
Yep.
Any other questions or discussion? I'd like to note for the record that Ms. Major has joined us.
So noted.
Okay, if there are no further questions or discussion, moving on to item B.
Wait.
Nope. Oh, Mayor Ward, sorry.
Yeah, so I appreciate Aaron bringing this forward, and I think, in principle, the FMR, a funding source for the FMR is a good idea. I think I would love to see a little bit more conversation on the percentages and the escalation. Understanding that will have certain implications on budgets that are presented to the Assembly. Make sure that folks understand what that will do to budgets with it currently proposed the way it is. I'm just curious on the Assembly's thoughts if there's discussion there.
Yes, Ms. Berman Williams.
I don't know that we're allowed to actually discuss the particulars of the ordinance at this time, but I wondered if there's information you can give me about how much money has been set aside, if any, in the past, specifically for maintenance. In other words, how much of a difference would this ordinance make in prior practices?
Let's see.
Whoever can answer this question.
We could probably answer, but I see Aaron is.
I was just going to say, in respect to last year, the proposed budgeted amount would be in line with what we did with, I guess I should say, the current fiscal year. So it wouldn't make a meaningful difference, but I think we have a lot more detailed information from staff here.
Yeah, I can get to you guys before next week. Historical, what has been contributed to fund balance or from general fund to the FMR, and then I can also maybe we can see what FY19 looked like and maybe do some pro formas going backwards a little bit and give you some relativeness to the numbers.
That would be great.
Okay, I see no further questions or discussion on this, so moving on to item 4B. Ordinance number 2018-20-10, an ordinance amending the FY 2018-19 budget by appropriating $2,329,787.62 from the general fund balance to the Facilities Maintenance Reserve Fund. The sponsors are Assembly Members Lejeski, Like, and Major. There's information on page 6 of your packet. And could we get a staff report from one of the, or multiple of the sponsors?
Sure. I think this one's pretty simple and pretty self-explanatory, but it's based off of the fact that we won a settlement against Corvius late last year and got the actual cash flow. And what this ordinance would do is move 100% of that cash flow that has a clean, neutral color to the money, it's not dedicated to anything, and move it out of the general fund and move it into the Facilities Maintenance Reserve Fund.
Any other sponsors want to add anything?
I mean, my reason for sponsoring is that we do have this backlog. We don't really know how big it is, but I know that we need to, this is a big bite at it, so that's why I sponsored.
Yes, so the same reason, right, between this one and the previous one, we have to get started somewhere. We need to have the conversation, and this certainly provides some funds that are available that get after a critical need for the community and won't necessarily take away from something that we had sort of allocated or planned for somewhere else at this point in time.
Assembly discussion or comments? Ms. Williams.
Are there other things that have been tentatively planned for this money? Or is it truly just money that appeared that has not been even thought about being budgeted for?
So under accounting rules, you can't account for a gain contingency, which is what this was, because we had 100%. We had increased our delinquency factor based on the non-payment of the previous taxes. So when we budget for property taxes, we budget in a delinquency factor, and we increase that to account for the fact that Corvius was not paying. So it's not been counted as revenue previously, or budgeted as revenue previously. Did I answer your question or confuse the matter?
Mr. Lejeski?
I think I can say this without getting into debate. Stop me if I am. But the intent is to grab the money before there are plans for it and move it to the FMR. So I think I did check informally with the mayor and asked him that question. If I recall, the answer was no, but I didn't really check with anybody else.
Any other assembly questions or discussion? Mr. Cooper?
Say the mayor.
Mr. Mayor.
Excuse me, pointing to me.
Maybe, Ms. Brady, could you give us a total of what's going to be in the FMR with this contribution?
Probably didn't bring that number. I brought how it would affect fund balance. The FMR, if I recall, is, I don't know if it's on here. No, I don't have it with me. Somebody else maybe even remembers. Are we at over 7 million is about where we're at right now. I don't have an exact number, so this would bump it up by this amount. I want to say like 7.5, but I'm kind of looking to see if anybody else remembers. But-
In the ordinance, it says 7.6.
Yeah, it says
Oh, okay.
7.6.
Oh, good. It's in the ordinance. I looked that one up then to put it in.
And
And nothing's been taken from there since. There may be a few additional dollars from projects that have finished with a little leftover.
yeah, that was the FMR at the time of drafting of the ordinance. So I don't remember if there's been any changes to it, but just keep that in mind. It was a historical snapshot.
Be really close to 10.
Mayor Ward?
If maybe you could explain the impact to the general fund as well.
Right, so a couple things. We've recently got signed opinions on our audit. We won't have an audit committee meeting until next Wednesday. So the audit's not been accepted by the audit committee, but we do have the preliminary numbers. And so with that change, there's also a little bit of a lapse that will go to FMR under the codified provisions in the code. And so that would make the fund balance, after taking this back out, grab the right sheet here, you'd be at about 28.3 million at 19.95%. So taking into account the audit, the lapse money going back out to FMR and the asset replacement fund, and then taking this money, this Corvius money back out and putting it to the FMR also. So that would be the end result after all those actions.
Any other questions or discussion on this ordinance?
Just when,
Mr. Tacky, yes.
I noticed that the settlement was like 2.58 million, but only 2.33 about went to the general fund. What happened to the rest of it? Or
Non-area wide and other taxes, so, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
Service areas.
Service areas, yeah.
Anything else? No? Okay. Moving on to item 5. This is other committee business and discussion. We've got monthly budget reports, which I think the last report we received was for November at the end of the year. Any questions or discussions on the monthly budget report? Seeing none. Item B, general fund updated fund balance report, which looks like we got in the middle of December for the last general fund update. Any questions or discussions on that? Seeing none. Moving on to item 6, mayor and assembly comments limited to finance committee topics. Mr. Mayor, do you have finance committee related items?
No comments.
Mr. Tacky?
Yeah, I wanted to actually request a report from the administration regarding waste, the solid waste disposal. I want to see like the difference between our commercial tonnages from this last summer compared to this summer that we just had with having attendance. I think it would be nice to be able to see that and see if it's been worth our while.
Mike?
No.
Ms. Sanford?
No, thank you.
Mr. Lejeski?
Nope.
Ms. Williams?
No comments.
Mr. Cooper?
No comments.
And I have no comment. And with that, the finance committee is adjourned.